Thank you guys so much. I know we're at the almost the end of the day, but please stay with us. I promise to provide an exciting and engaging and insightful um, fire chat with. Let me just do a quick introduction. Greg Hall, Chief Marketing Officer at MoneyGram, over 20 years of direct-to-consumer growth leadership in the financial sector. And for me, I'm Didi Shum. I'm your moderator for the panel. I'm Senior Sales Director at Adsmovil. We're the leading one. Sorry, we connect brands to omni-channel solutions, and we're the leading certified minority-owned. I know you were asking about it, so I'm making sure I'm telling you. We offer an array of products to really authentically and organically, and I think that's something that's been talking about throughout the whole panel and the whole day today through the U.S. Hispanic consumers. So that's what we do. But before we get into it, I want to do, if with your approval, I'm going to give a brief introduction and history of MoneyGram, and as well as the legacy, right? I'm going to cheat because this is 8 decades of success that I'm going to be covering. MoneyGram is a leading player that you guys all know in the remittance market. The company has grown to serve over more than 150 million people in the past 5 years in over 200 countries and territories. I'm only covering 2 territories myself, so I can't even imagine doing 200 territories. And processing more than 200 billion, and that's with the B, annually. Historically, enabling cash-to-cash in-person cross-border payments. And of course, you guys probably have seen the logo and the kiosks in the CVS local stores. However, today, I want to introduce you to the MoneyGram of now, one that has been evolved to meet consumers' needs and reinventing itself into a global fintech with over 50% of its business done digitally and offering a variety of products and services. Now we can get into it.
That was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. The company has been in business for 80 years. And can you please start by telling us more about MoneyGram's evolution?
Good. Thanks, everybody. Glad to be here today and look forward to the conversation. Let me just level set real quick. How many people have heard of MoneyGram before today? Oh, that's awesome. See, brand awareness is not a problem like Coca-Cola. That's easy. No, and we're going to talk about F1. So how many people watch or know anything about F1? Almost about the same amount. I think there's more for MoneyGram there. That's actually pretty cool. Good job. So yeah, MoneyGram's evolution is interesting. She mentions 80 years, and for 75 of those 80 years, we were largely the same company. We were a retail cash business, and if you wanted to send money to someone across a border, right, you used MoneyGram, Western Union, or some others, but those were the 2 big players. And the business was really take cash into a retail store. You mentioned CVS, but we have 400,000 plus locations globally in 200 countries. So it's a massive footprint of retail presence. But you would take cash into CVS here and give them $100 in the US, and you want to send your mom in Mexico, and she can go into a store in Mexico and pick up the equivalent conversion of pesos there. And so for 75 years, that was most of the business. In the last 5-6 years, our digital business has really accelerated. And so now over half of our transactions are done digitally. And so the easiest way for me to explain this to people in the US who know it or don't, is like, look, it's Venmo, but for cross-border, right? That is how we're evolving. And that is a massive shift from being take my cash into a store, take the time to do that. Now it's link my bank account, link a debit card, etc. I can send it into a bank account. I can send it into a wallet. I can send it my mom can still pick it up in cash if that's what she wants to do. And so it's interesting, when you're in 200 countries, you have massive corridor differences between your customers. When we send to India, most people want to receive in an account these days. When we send to Mexico, people still want to receive cash, right? It's just a cultural difference. And so talk about complexities of how we've evolved, having 2 or having 200, it does create some challenges. And so I think where we're on is this digital transformation that most companies use that term. For us, it's been how do you enable that app to do all the things I just described so that people can pick it up, send money, receive money in multiple different countries. And then how do you transition customers that were either used to walking in, right? And some will never change, right? Some will be like, I'm taking my cash in, that's how I do things. Then there's a segment that kind of toggle between both. Sometimes they still take cash, sometimes they use, and others have totally switched, right? And so how do you understand them? Because that's where everything's heading, and that's the group that's skewing a lot younger, right? So when we think about where's Gen Z and how are they growing, they're all in that digital first. They don't really think about taking cash in. And so anyway, I could talk for a long time, but hope that gives some context of the company and kind of where we're going and how we're evolving a little bit.
I mean, I'm sure the crowd wants to hear you talk more than I do. I'm just asking the questions today. But it just also, there's so much evolution that's taking place. Where do you see the business in the next decade?
Yeah, it's interesting. If you think about our space, if we just focus on remittance for a second, right? It used to be Western Union, then it was MoneyGram, and then there was like everybody else, right? It's kind of like Hertz, Avis, and everybody else, right? Think about it that way. Now, when you think about global remittance, and you always had banks, right? So if you sent large amounts, you'd use HSBC or whatever your bank was. But in that remittance category now, you're seeing new competitors come in new ways, right? So you might have Revolut, which is really more of kind of a neobank over in Europe, which is very popular. They didn't lead with remittance, but remittance is becoming one of their stronger products, right? And then you have, Cash App here in the U.S. If they evolve globally, that's actually very interesting. That's harder to do than say. But and Venmo being part of PayPal, how does that integrate? So you have all these different types of businesses that we're having to compete with. When we think about the next 10 years, we have to decide who do we want to be in 10 years, right? Do I want to be a neobank 10 years from now? Do I want to be a remittance company that has just extra services? Do I want to move into B2B, right? So it's not just, we just do really peer-to-peer. So if you're sending money business to business, that's really not our forte. It's if I want to send money to Sydney and she's in another country, that's the use case. And so do we evolve B2B? And so there's like a myriad of that. And if you look at the traditional players, Western Union is really kind of, they've added digital capabilities. They're staying P2P from what we can see. But new players like Wise, who used to be called TransferWise and is evolved, Remitly, very strong in the U.S., is very strong from a remittance side. But then you have Revolut, and you have these other players coming in that are just going to cloud up the space. And so how do you differentiate? It's the challenge over the next 10 years. And then I think we'll move more towards, we won't be a bank. We'll never be a bank, I don't think. But we'll move towards more diverse services.
And if you turn into a bank, I would transfer all my money to your bank. I want to talk a little bit about F1 because that's pretty much why we're all here and excited. So Greg has a video that he wants to share with you guys. Let me make sure I can get this right.
We're gone fast, 205 on the dash, speeding through the game, y'all never gone past, on fast. We're gone past, 205 on the dash, speeding through the game, y'all never gone past, on fast. Never foot on the gas, turn the corner on the door, and flash. We're gone past, 205 on the dash, speeding through the game, y'all never gone past, on fast. We're gone fast.
I mean, the commercial spot makes yes. I mean, that commercial spot makes me want to become an F1 driver, but I don't think I'm built for it.
Yeah, is it okay if I talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the question. Why F1 and what's your motivation behind the partnership?
Yeah, no, and F1, I get that question asked pretty much. I get two questions. One, why did you guys do F1? And then everyone's like, how the hell do you guys justify that type of investment? Like, what's your ROI, blah, 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 blah. And so why F1? First of all, when we think about that, what we described going from 75 years of being a cash remittance retail-focused type company, and that was your brand, to being acquired by a private equity firm, which we were a little bit over a year ago, who would actually like to sell us for a massive multiple in a few years. They get their multiple if we're not a tired old retail cash business with a nice footprint, but if we're actually this, developing, growing, digital, healthy kind of fintech, right? And so how do you transition that? Well, you have to do a couple things. One, you have to grow your digital business, which we're focused on. But two, you have to change your brand perception, right? Because in 3 or 4 years, if investors think of us as MoneyGram and then there's Western Union, like our multiple is going to be X. If they think of like MoneyGram, Remitly, Wise, Revolut, Cash App in the same category, our multiple is entirely different. And so F1 did a lot of things for us, right? First of all, we had to reinvigorate the brand a little bit because as well known as we are globally, which is really cool, we have this great brand awareness globally, we were known for something that we're trying to transition to being known for something different. And so there was a little bit of the shock factor, so we had to kind of think about what's going to give us that. The other part was, from an overall branding perspective, if in 10 years we want to be a more diverse beyond remittance company, how do I attract new customer segments? How do I think about people who send, our customers send $400 to $500 on average, US equivalent today. There's a lot of people that send $3,000 to $5,000. Why don't they use us? Why don't they think about us? We use the same bank rails. uh, into the same wallets. Like we do it as fast or better than HSBC. We're at a fraction of the cost, but people don't think of us. And so that's just one example of how do you get people thinking differently. F1 for us as part of our overall brand strategy had kind of this initial shock value. And there really was. When we launched, there was like, what the heck did MoneyGram just do? And that's exactly what we wanted. Because when people go, wait, what just happened? Like, like, what? Like, why did they do that? Why are they a title sponsor of F1? That's awesome for us because it stimulated all this earned media and a lot of attention, and people started talking about the brand differently. The other thing you want to do is grow, which then obviously our private equity owners are saying that's a great investment. Are you actually growing your business? And so that was a key piece. But it's also who do you grow with, right? So growing with the existing segment, but then how do you introduce new people to think about you differently? And this ad, what I like about it, and Cutwater, our creative agency who helped put this together, kind of came with the idea of F1 made sense to us from a brand because the tenets of F1 are really about innovation, technology, speed, safety, quite honestly. And when you think about transferring money and financial services, those are massively important, right? So there's this great brand synergy of what we want to lean into. What this ad tries to do is metaphorically talk about F1 and the driver and the technology of our app to get people thinking about it differently and kind of raising that awareness. And so anyway, again, I could keep talking, but that hopefully is a little bit about why F1 and why that ad kind of makes sense.
I mean,
Easy. Oh. That was me.
I mean, bad news for you. We're going to keep talking. So there's a lot of success with the partnership, and I want to give a fun fact about the brand success with the F1 partnership. In honor of the brand's activation around the U.S. Grand Prix last year, the city of Dallas Mayor Eric Johnson proclaimed October 18, 2023, the official MoneyGram Haas F1 Team Day in Dallas, where your MoneyGram headquarters located. Get claps on that.
Yep.
That's a big deal.
We didn't really get a key. We just got a certificate.
I'll get a printed one, and I'll send it over to City to give it to you. But can you tell us about some of your activations?
Yeah, no, thanks. It was interesting watching Luke and Allison talk about and how jealous I am of their budgets and what they get to do in Times Square and some really cool stuff because they're Coca-Cola, right? But when you think about a sponsorship, what are you trying to get out of it is different for everybody. Like some companies, it's a massive B2B play. They're a massive SaaS organization and they want to bring CTOs from across the world to F1 and they want to convert them. That's really not our primary purpose for doing this, is what I mentioned before. And so for us, the sponsorship was about creating that awareness, and what we centered on initially was just putting our customers at the absolute center, fans and customers of everything we do. And so when we launched and we unveiled the car for the first time, it wasn't our CEO with the drivers, it wasn't me with the drivers. We had a customer hanging with the drivers, and they pull the black curtain back on every car. We do that every year. And so everything we do is about customers. So all of our activation is around that. Dallas is really cool because Dallas is where we're headquartered, and there's a race in Austin in October. So we had the team in last year, and so my team sitting here worked really hard with the Haas team to put together a really special day. And so ahead of that, we partnered with a local high school and their STEM program. And so we had engineering, and it was their STEM program has engineering and brain science, health, and a business marketing section and everything else. So we had multiple people on the team work with each group of the students in the weeks leading up to this, and they all had projects they had to work on. But some worked with AO, some worked with their Faith, who is their physiologist and everything. And so it was a really rich program, and it culminated in a visit when we were in Dallas. We took the team. So you have Gunter, Nico, Kevin. We had Natalie from ESPN hosting this at this high school with their STEM program. And a presentation. Obviously, it grew a lot of public attention in Dallas, and so the city learned about it. They proclaimed it, MoneyGram Haas F1 Day in the city of Dallas, which was really cool. But it's just one example of how we bring either fans and customers to it, or make it really engaging, and it's not your typical maybe sponsorship like other people think of it.
And now that we learned more about your activations, how do you utilize the partnerships and activations you have to drive brand awareness and also attract new customers?
Yeah. You sound like you work for my private equity owners.
Are you hiring?
Yeah. Yeah, it kind of going back to that question of like, how do you justify this investment, and are you seeing value out of it or not? And if I bucket it for us, right, it was about three things. It's about changing brand perception, driving more awareness of who that is, attracting new customer segments, and just general growth, right? So those are your high-level KPIs. Now within that, when you think about brand KPIs, it's things about, well, what's the media value you're getting? Are you getting the eyeballs you thought you'd get or you're paying for? That's kind of step one. Step two, we looked really hard at earned media, right? Because for us, who was writing about us and what they were saying was super important. Like, are we moving? Is that something that says we're moving the needle in people's minds of who we are as a company? Prior to F1, Bloomberg and Reuters might write about us every time we had an earnings release, and it was really bland and boring and and that changed overnight. And so they actually still wrote about us, but their articles were very different. But we picked up Adweek, and we picked up Sports Illustrated, and we picked up Forbes, and we picked up, so you have these new outlets writing articles, and everyone immediately started talking to us about global P2P platform, global technology company, fintech company. That was really important for us early on. Anyway, so that's kind of on that media and earned media side. We look at brand awareness. We measure it quarterly, like most of you guys all do. Are we moving the needle in awareness in the areas where we'd like to? Are we moving sentiment, right? So underneath that, are people thinking about us more innovatively and as a technology type first company? One thing that helps with that is with F1, and the other answer to why F1 relative to other sports sponsorships, F1 is in about 20 different countries where they have races every year. We're in 200 countries, but those 20 countries represent about 70% of our revenue. So US is our biggest market, but it's only a third of our revenue. Those other 19 countries represent, do the math, 40% more, right? And then you have everybody else. So that's really important as we thought about how do we maximize the dollars in this benefit or the sponsorship. Beyond that, the other thing you get with F1, and this is a whole bucket in my board presentation just 2 boards ago, what I called intangibles. One thing you get with F1 is you get this Drive to Survive show. I know you guys have seen that. Most people have. We weren't on it last season because it was our first season. It's always a year in arrears. But this year we're now in the show. And so whether it's a show dedicated to the Haas team or just in general, the MoneyGram brand's everywhere, right? Which is really cool until you pick those up. But Brad Pitt's running an F1 movie. It's going to launch next week. If they hadn't gone on strike, would have been out this year. So that'll be cool. And it's all going to be in that. We had CNBC did a 1-hour, what do you call it? What's the right word, Sydney? Documentary on F1 and the business of F1. And so they really only talked to 4 teams and chronicled 4 teams in this. And so Sarah Eisen did a great job. She had Mercedes, Red Bull, McLaren, and us, actually. So you had Gunter and us. And then from a sponsorship, they only actually talked about one sponsorship and interviewed one sponsor on the entire show, and it happened to be us. And so we got a lot of great press on that. And so these are intangibles that it's hard to say, how much did I get out of that? But that's actually kind of a big deal. And so when you go to, when MDP's at an investor conference, people are coming up to them oh, you guys invested in this F1 company, right? That's actually good for me that people are saying that to them. Then the other side, beyond the brand pieces from a KPI, get to, are you attracting new customers, right? So are you resonating with a new customer segment? And one of the things we do, we did last year, because I know where our product roadmap is going, we wanted to attract a lot of non-remittance customers into engaging in the app and other things. But if you don't send money internationally today, you never would. The team, again, sitting here, put together a promotion where we give away money every week based on how the team does and kind of gamifies it. And so we picked up over 100,000 new subscribers that are non-remittance customers that as we launch new products coming up in the near future, I should have a very low-cost way to acquire them, which is really cool. They're already comfortable with the brand. And then you look at the really hard part is when the analytics team has to look at, well, how much lift in revenue did you actually get during race periods and things like that? That's really hard to do, right? And it's kind of like this, and then you kind of hope that assumption doesn't change too much, but you do have those. But it's really a myriad of probably about 7 key value drivers when we think about how do you justify this investment and how do you decide whether it's working or not.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I'm going to have 2 more questions, and then we're going to go open to the Q&A just to make sure that everybody has the ability to ask questions. There was so much success from the last year and a half in terms of the F1 partnership. What are you looking forward to this year? How do we beat that?
Yeah, and F1 in true form throws you curveballs all the time, right? We had this great year with Gunter, and then they're like, oh, by the way, Gunter's going to leave. Wait, what just happened? He's a star, and they're like, this is great. Oh, Nico's going to be gone next year. Oh, he's just our top driver right now. That's cool. So I think this year what's exciting is building on the learnings from last year because we had a lot of things that worked and we had a lot of things that didn't work. And so how do we lean into the things that work, try new things, and then actually not do the things that didn't work in the past? One example of when I say didn't work, and last year we did this here in Miami. We had a great on-site. We were up at the mall, was it Aventura Mall? And you had kind of what I call a traditional activation, right? You had the drivers, you had a Mother's Day thing. It was so cool. We had several hundred people show up to do this. Now, what we learned is when you're in a race weekend, everything in Miami is super expensive this week, right? So just getting into a mall or renting a space or whatever you're doing is super expensive. Alternatively, for the race in Japan last year, we did a watch party in Vegas. The benefit of Japan's race in Vegas is it starts at 10 p.m. Saturday night. And so it was a slow weekend in Vegas. Relatively, there's nothing big going on. We rented out Topgolf. We had influencers. Like for a fraction of what we spent in Miami, we had hundreds, maybe thousands of people engage this. And then we had other promotions running. And so as we step back, we're like, we need to do more of that and probably less of stuff, that traditional brands might do. And so I'm excited about how do we build on that? How do we kind of take certain things to the next level? And build off of. But yeah, it's ever changing. It's not static.
I mean, I'm a fan now, so I'll be tuning in, and I'll check in with you in a year and
Yeah.
see how we go. Last question on my end is, many brands here are already in sports, and there are many brands who are hesitant to get into sports marketing. What closing advice do you have to those who are interested in entering this space? Because it's already crowded. What are opportunities and challenge for reaching sports fan on a global and domestic level?
Yeah, it's such an individual question to the company, and this sounds like I'm punting the question, but it really depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? If you're trying to get eyeballs in a certain geography, like if you want to get eyeballs in the U.S., like NBA is a great way to do it, right? And NFL is a great way to do it. But if you're trying to get global reach, those are actually somewhat limited. Yes, they have audiences that are great. When you think about soccer, like European soccer, right? If you could be the front of Chelsea, like that's awesome, but they only play in Europe. Right? They don't play in 20 other countries throughout there. So where they activate, and we've talked to those teams, they're like, well, they activate in Europe. Well, that's great. Like, well, what if I want to get everybody down to Ghana? Oh, hey, that sounds crazy. Like, we can't do that, right? And so, but my point is, like, if it depends what your brand wants to do. And for us, having that global reach and those things all made so much sense. But it might be different for another brand. So I really think the first question is like, what do you want to accomplish? And then where can you get that reach? And then for us, the other thing I'd say is, and this probably is universal regardless of what you're trying to do, is find the right fit with the company or the team you're going to sponsor. Because as we talk to so many different teams, just like in companies, the culture is very different. And one of the benefits we have at Haas is our culture is so similar to ours. Like, we're a bit of an underdog. Remember, like Avis to Hertz, like historically, we're not the big guy. I don't have the biggest budget. They're not the biggest team. They don't have the biggest budget. They got to be scrappy. We're both U.S. headquartered teams with global businesses, right? We've got, the slower cars, the drivers that are a little bit older. We've got like all these things against us, right? But like, I mean, for the love of God, pull for us. Like, it's awesome, right? If we win, it's amazing, And so, but I think that what happens then is when the teams get together, there's that synergy between how they work. And we were talking to another team actually just last night. I was at an event. And I was talking to their head of sponsorships the same ways, because asking me like, how would we work together? And so we're trialing some things with them. I said, look, I'm looking to see how person X and person Y work together and how that comes out. Because if they can work together and not come to me with questions and they just build value, that's awesome. If they have to go back and look at the contract and say, well, it really only said 3 social posts, this would be the 4th, we can't do that, we're not the right sponsor for you guys, right? And so, but that's different depending on what you're trying to accomplish. Anyway, hope that helps.
Awesome. Now we're going to open to the floor. Any questions on that?
Talk a little bit about key competitors in the space and new brands. So curious to hear, maybe not as relevant now, maybe still, over the last 3 to 5 years, we've seen like even some impact here in Miami with the Heat Arena. How much was like the initial boom of like crypto as an example?
Yeah.
And the constant volatility of that affecting your business? Is it like not so much, it's not as liquid or instant? How does that affect your business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think crypto for us, and if you go to our app, one thing you can do is buy and sell 3 different cryptocurrencies. We're not as, our app's nowhere near like a Coinbase or anything like that. It does offer the service. I think crypto for us, and how do we use it long term to help people move money, right? When we think about where crypto evolves, how do you use stable coins, right? Like if you can hold money in one currency as you travel globally, and then you just cash it out in whatever fiat or use it, you have a debit card attached or a credit card attached to it, and you can use that back, it's back. Like that is really empowering and kind of game changing. But as far as like us competing with crypto.com, we're never going to do that. Like I don't have the budget. Like when we launched our first crypto services, like Tom Brady's on there and Matt Damon's on there. I'm like, what's my budget? And it's like this. I'm like, yeah, come on, guys. Like, did you watch TV at all or stream anything in the last 2 weeks? Like, so I think for us that's what it is. But again, crypto was like super exciting, and then went, and now it's kind of like this again. But we'll just have to see.
Anyone else?
So in terms of you looking at brand awareness, I know you mentioned that quite a bit is shifting brand perception. I don't know if you did like brand lift studies, but were you also looking at like social listening? I know if you're moving from physical space to digital, that would seem like a great place to start to look at.
It's a great question. The question was, in addition to brand lift, do we look at social listening? And the answer is yes. Now, what I will say about, there's different types of ways to do social listening. We looked at kind of the equivalent solutions for Nielsen, and there's several companies that do this, but in the social media category. And directionally, they're all pretty good, but then over time, it's tough to get anything that's really consistent, like a Nielsen, that you can kind of say it's a really firm data. For example, like we used one service, I want to tell you, like it was great. Like the first, here built a benchmark, and I'm like, great. As we start year 2, that's our benchmark. Like, how do we go up and down? And then the numbers came in, and it was like A versus 11. Like those don't even make sense. Like, what are we talking about? And so, I think the technology for social listening, from my scene, it's like it's still evolving. It's really important, but it's hard for me to put it in front of a board and show it over time as consistently as like Nielsen or some of the other things are. Nielsen in that, but like even like a survey study where I can say, look, here's the criteria, here's who we talk to, our N is always 5,000 in this region, and here's how that's changing over time. That's pretty stable, but if you have a better social listening platform, I would love to talk to you about it. Anyway, thanks for the question. Yeah. Yeah, no, great question. And so that ad for us is actually kind of edgy. Like, I don't know, like the music was not what we would normally have used in the past, like, and just kind of the tone of it for financial services, that's as edgy as it gets. But no, I'd say when you think about attracting the younger segment, like that is who is digital first, right? And they don't think otherwise. Right. And so it's like, how do you get them engaged? How do you make something meaningful to them? And so for us, it's how do you get the voice out there? How do you resonate? And the media sources that we're reaching customers on, like when we ran some brand tests in certain markets in the US end of last year. It was really interesting. We did this nice media mix, and you had kind of, traditional cable TV and everything else, and you had your streaming services and social. And actually the cable sections performed the worst for us, which is really kind of interesting because I'm old enough to be like, that was like massive, not too long ago. And so I think the advice I'd have based on that learning would be like, you need to constantly be looking at the contribution of each of your kind of media channels and tactics, because for us it was a little bit, I guess it's intuitive now that I say it, but it just was a little bit counterintuitive that it was such a big difference. And so we've actually pulled that out of our current campaigns. We're not doing any cable right now. It's all streaming, and then certain platforms that we've seen perform better. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a great question. a couple aspects to your question I'll answer. So first of all, how do you compete? First of all, like in the US, we've decided not to necessarily compete P2P for US to US. It's a free service for Venmo. It's a free service for Zelle. It's a free, like we don't want to offer a free service. It's hard to make money that way, right? And so we said, no, we'd rather, we still offer it and we charge a fee and people still use it, which blows my mind. I'm like, why are you? But nonetheless, it still happens. And so part of it is like determining who you want to be and not want to be, and like then who your competitive set is. For us, our top markets, we think about them in send and receive groups. Like where are people sending money from and where are people receiving money? And for most of our customers are immigrants. They've moved somewhere, they got a job, and they're sending money back home to loved ones in some form or fashion. So for us, the send markets are US, Canada, Australia, and 5 major European countries, which would be UK, France, Spain, Italy, Germany, probably in those orders. The other European countries, like Nordics and everything, are strong, but they're just not as big, and they don't have as many people sending. So they're very important. We love Sweden, but like it's not quite as big. And so then you have your receive markets, right? And the receive markets end up being massive South Asia. Like if you're sending from Europe, you're sending to Eastern Europe. Like Romania is a big receive country. Pakistan, India, Nepal, Bangladesh, etc. In the U.S., your big receive, Mexico is your biggest, right? That makes a lot of sense. A lot of immigrants here. But India is a big one. Jamaica is a big one. Pakistan's a big one. Guatemala, Honduras, etc. And so you kind of have to decide as marketers, like where you're going to spend your dollars, right? Am I spending them on the send side or spending on the receive side? And I'd say in the past, when I started, we sponsored cricket. We were one of the sponsors for T20 World Cup cricket, which was really cool. And if you're in South, like it's the second most watched sport in the world. Like we don't watch it here, but like globally it's massive. South Asia, it's massive. Africa, Europe, Middle East, it's really, really popular. But those are all mostly receive countries. And what we decided when you move towards more of this digital first, I'm gonna use my app, the sender's making the decision more often than the receiver. And so not only do we decide who to compete against, but we also say, hey, we're gonna shift dollars disproportionately to those send markets. It doesn't mean the receiver doesn't have influence, but more often than not, the sender's like, hey, I just sent you some money, you can either go pick it up or, give me your information, we can put it in your bank account. So anyway, I hope that helps a little bit. Thanks for the question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, massively, right? Because and soccer is an amazing sport, love it. But if we'd put our name across one of the top teams' jersey, which cost the same or arguably more than being an F1 title sponsor, we don't get the same impact, right? In my mind, like so the aspirational piece. And so where that aspirational comes in is multifaceted. Like with your customers or potential future customers, how do they think about you? How is it aspirational? What does it say about you and your brand? From a company side, it like reinvigorated the whole organization. When we launched this, people that have been there 20, 30 years came up and like, that was like a bolt of lightning. Like that was awesome. Like people are so fired up right now. What are we doing? And so I think that played heavily into it. Are we over time?
Okay. No, you got the most questions.
I'm getting the nods. Like I'll just keep talking. You got to pull me down. Yeah, I'll keep going. Oh, is that what I'm in the? We do need to.
Yeah, thank you so much, Greg. I think.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.